You've said sorry for wanting more, haven't you? Sorry for dreaming too loudly. Sorry for wanting peace instead of drama. Sorry for being tired of pretending you're fine. You shrink your voice so others can stay comfortable. And when the world calls that humility, you quietly believe it. But let me tell you something. The quiet ones, the ones who stay up at night asking, is this all I was meant for? They're often the ones meant for more. This story begins in a small town in Oregon, inside a half-forgotten clock repair shop called Harrison Timepieces. Old clocks lined the wooden shelves, each one ticking in its own rhythm, some too fast, some too slow, some silent altogether. And behind the counter sat Eli Harrison, a man in his mid-40s, with hands rough from years of fixing what everyone else had given up on. For 30 years, Eli repaired other people's time, cuckoo clocks, pocket watches, wristwatches, but his own time. He'd let it rust. He daydreamed once of designing his own clock, a masterpiece that didn't just tell time but told truth. A clock that reminded people their hours were sacred. But the world never asked for it, so Eli stopped asking for himself. Every morning, he'd wind up the shop's biggest wall clock, the one his father had built before passing, and whisper, maybe tomorrow. His daughter Lila had gone to college in another state. His wife had left years earlier, calling his dreams too heavy to carry. He told himself he didn't mind, that this small shop, with its sawdust smell and constant ticking, was enough. But inside, he was a man staring at his own unfinished design, a blueprint rolled up in the corner, edges frayed, covered in dust. The clock he wanted to build would never chime, because he'd convinced himself that no one would care. One rainy afternoon, a young man named Chris walked in, a musician whose guitar had broken. He wasn't there for a clock. He just needed somewhere dry to sit. They talked about wasted years, about people who laugh at your plans. Before leaving, Chris looked at Eli and said, "You fix time for everyone else. Why won't you fix your own?" That sentence, casual, almost careless, landed like thunder in Eli's chest. That night, Eli sat in the dark, listening to the uneven rhythm of the clocks. Tick, tick, tick. Some were early, some late, some silent. He realized they were all mirrors of him, pieces of life, out of sync. He'd spent his life repairing broken clocks to avoid facing his own stillness. For weeks, he moved through his routine, pretending not to hear that voice. Why won't you fix your own? He cleaned the same counters, polished the same glass, avoided the corner where the old blueprint lay hidden. Then one morning, the big wall clock, his father's clock, stopped. No reason, no damage, just silence. He tried everything, oil, gears, pendulum checks. Nothing worked. And for the first time in years, Eli didn't feel frustration. He felt fear, because deep down, he knew that clock was his last connection to meaning. He sat, staring at its still hands for hours, and then whispered, "Maybe it's waiting for me to start moving first." A week later, Eli reopened his father's old blueprint drawer. Inside lay the forgotten design, his own idea for a clock that would only tick when the person beside it was doing something they loved. A clock of purpose. He looked at it for a long time and said, quietly, "I don't need anyone's permission." He began building it in secret, using spare brass, borrowed springs, and sleepless nights. Each part he added seemed to restart something inside him. His hands steadied, his back straightened. The shop, once a coffin of broken things, became a living workshop again. If you're re-listening right now and you've left your blueprint in a corner somewhere, go find it, open it, even if you're scared, even if they laughed. Your dream doesn't need applause, it needs you. Take this story as your sign. It's not too late to begin again. Every morning before opening the shop, Eli worked on his clock. He didn't tell anyone, he didn't post it, he didn't even know if it would work. But with every gear he adjusted, he repaired a part of himself. He stopped apologizing for his quietness. He stopped saying, "I'm fine." He began to say, "I'm still working." Months passed. One cold December night, the clock was finished. It stood on the counter, elegant, simple, its pendulum gleaming like a heartbeat. When he pressed the switch, nothing happened. He laughed, not bitterly but softly, because for the first time, he wasn't afraid of failure. He placed his hand on it and whispered, "Thank you for making me move." And then, tick, a single sound, not loud, but alive. He didn't cry, he just watched, smiling like someone who'd finally heard his own heartbeat after years of silence. A few weeks later, Lila came home for winter break. She found the new clock and asked, "Who's it for?" Eli smiled. "For whoever's ready to stop apologizing for their dreams." Lila paused, then said, "You mean, for you?" He nodded. "Maybe it starts with me." They stood there listening to its rhythm. It wasn't perfect. The ticks weren't even, but it was real. And sometimes, that's all a dream needs. Permission to exist imperfectly. Word spread in the small town. People came to see the clock that ticks for dreamers. Eli didn't charge money. He just told them, "You already have one. It's inside you. You just have to start it." You know, maybe the reason you're restless isn't because you're broken. It's because you're waiting for permission that's already yours. Eli spent years fixing time for others before realizing that his own time was sacred too. So if you've been apologizing for dreaming, stop. The world benefits more from your authentic fire than from your quiet compliance. If this story touched you, don't let it fade when the video ends. Tonight, take one small action. Write the first line, draw the first sketch, open that folder again, and subscribe if you want more stories that remind you you are not late, you're just beginning again. Because in this quiet corner of the internet, dreamers don't need to say sorry anymore.